Republican Ron DeSantis argues free speech is part of his presidential campaign, while his own state government attacks free speech and books in Florida. Or Elon Musk has talked about more free speech when he would take over Twitter, but then he went ahead and cracked down on actual free speech as well as opposing views, tilting the site to his own preferences. As the Washington Post reports, others document Musk's obvious free speech hypocrisy when he goes after groups that criticize him. Now, those prominent clashes show how it's actually become quite popular to claim the mantle of free speech, even if you're a billionaire or, say in this case, a right-wing politician who doesn't actually do things that support everyone's free speech, including those with whom you differ. So it is actually worth stepping back to see how all of this is quite a long ways from the free speech court precedents which form the actual foundation of First Amendment law in America, like the New York Times, which was able to beat then-President Nixon's effort to censor that journalism, the New York Times critical Vietnam reporting, a landmark case which was argued and won by attorney Floyd Abrams. He pioneered something that actually didn't exist at the time, and this is actually often forgotten, but at the time there was no established, ongoing law firm legal practice based on First Amendment cases. It's easy to forget, but before some of those cases and Floyd Abrams' advocacy, the Supreme Court actually went decades without ruling on any big cases protecting controversial free speech. It's a legal history that I mentioned because it's relevant right now with a new documentary that PBS has. It's called Floyd Abrams Speaking Freely. And let me tell you up top, news junkies may remember Mr. Abrams from all those big cases and being on the news, or even his recent appearance right here on the Beats Summit series, because full disclosure, before joining MSNBC, I did work for Floyd Abrams as a lawyer for years, including on free speech cases and First Amendment cases. And I'm briefly in this actual documentary where I say some true things about what a thoughtful and kind mentor, Mr. Abrams, who you see there, has been to so many people, including myself. I say that up front so you can process that, because I don't claim to be a completely disinterested party here, but I do still think this new documentary from PBS, independently made, does something unusual. It traces how people advancing free speech, those would be the clients, like the New York Times, and their lawyers, like Mr. Abrams, actually, many decades ago, developed this area of law that we keep hearing so much about today. So I think it might interest you as well. Here's a little bit of this new documentary.
Few people have done as much to shape the First Amendment as it exists today.
We want to avoid is any kind of system of law which allows, why did you print that story instead of another story?
What I fear is that a loss in this case will necessarily lead to a kind of blandness, a kind of avoidance of television dealing with hard and real and poignant social problems.
You know, Floyd was in those days like a legal rock star, and people really flocked to him. That's what you wanted to do. You wanted to come out of law school, be a lawyer. You might want to be a First Amendment lawyer and work for Floyd Abrams.
I wouldn't be where I am professionally or otherwise without the way that he mentored me and helped me think through things in a really big way, which he didn't have to do.
Reporters have a right not to reveal their sources because that's a part of news gathering.
He was just sort of insatiably curious, genuinely interested in the other side of absolutely everything.
We have to lean very, very strongly in the direction of free expression, whatever the future may bring us.
His legacy will be as a fierce supporter of our Constitution and our constitutional rights under the First Amendment, which is just about the most important thing in our Constitution.
That last voice you heard there is a staunch Republican lawyer, Ted Olson. The first voice was ACLU's progressive lawyer, Jamil Jaffer. Because principled advocacy, legal or otherwise, is always different than partisan politics.
Floyd was my lawyer in a time of great trial and tribulation.
It was a bombshell that almost derailed Clarence Thomas's confirmation to the Supreme Court.
I found out that this law professor, Anita Hill, had made allegations of sexual harassment against Clarence Thomas, for whom she had worked.
The Senate still wants to know who leaked them to National Public Radio.
The way they were talking about me as if I'd done something really wrong and criminal. And I remember going home that night and suddenly said to myself, they're going to subpoena me. They're going to investigate this and they're going to subpoena me. And I want Floyd Abrams as my lawyer.
If journalists reveal their confidential sources, there won't be any confidential sources. And if that gets violated, the public just won't have the sort of information that all of us need.
The senators decided that it wasn't worth the bad publicity for them.
It'll go to my grave with me. My husband doesn't know. Nobody knows who my sources were. People who do journalism for a living have been very lucky to have Floyd Abrams on our side for generations.
NPR's Nina Totenberg continues her reporting to this day. She did, as she said there, protect that source with the backing of both the First Amendment itself and that lawyer advocating for it. And Justice Thomas and the wider Supreme Court, like other parts of government, have lately these days found that a free press is at least a partial check on their actions and some of their secrets in ways they don't like. That's how it's supposed to be. The warning here, if there is one, would be, I think, that free societies must vigilantly defend free speech, which means confronting also those who fraudulently invoke its branding while still trying to crush the substance of actual free speech. And if there's any inspiration here, even in our very challenging times right now, perhaps it's that something so fundamental, the mere peaceful presentation of speech, ideas, and facts, is still actually so potent and powerful. If we're going to have fights, maybe this is one freedom of ours that is still worth fighting for.